The lights flicker. Screams. A microphone drops to the stage. Michael B. Jordan stands motionless. The camera catches his every strained breath. Did he really say that? A whisper flies through the air. Phones are raised, red recording dots blinking. His face is frozen between rage and pain. In his eyes, a glare of indignation, the air taut like before a thunderstorm. The producer frantically gestures. Security moves in closer. It's over, someone whispers backstage. On Twitter, the first hashtag explodes, Jordan controversy. The smell of hot stage lights, the bitter taste of adrenaline. The cameras don't stop rolling. He takes a step forward, his voice cracks. You didn't even listen to what I said. Silence. Then, an explosion of applause, shouts, comments. Everything has spiraled out of control. But to understand how Michael B. Jordan ended up at the heart of Hollywood's loudest racial scandal, one that threatened his career and millions in investments, we must go back a few months to that cold November morning in Manhattan. Michael was sitting in his rented Soho loft, savoring the silence that preceded yet another storm. He was drinking coffee that smelled like dark, bitter sin, gazing at the gray, restless New York sky. Here in this city, he was valued for his fame, yet he always felt slightly out of place, like a country boy at a grand party who just happens to know how to use the right fork. He didn't play by Hollywood's rules. His new rule, quiet power. True authority doesn't shout, it simply is. This was a philosophy he had absorbed while renovating an old gym in his hometown, paying off the debts of neighbors no one noticed, or funding the refurbishment of an old house so that orphan teenagers could live there and have a future. He remembered where he came from. Seeing the world he had left and the world he currently inhabited gave Michael a rare clarity. He believed that doing the right thing wasn't what was convenient. It was what you did when no one was looking. Now, he was investing a substantial portion of his wealth, about $50 million, in an ambitious project, transforming a derelict old warehouse in his native Newark into a modern educational center and affordable housing complex. This was his chance not just to give money, but to build a legacy. But for this to happen, he needed the backing of major players. Today was the final investors' meeting in one of Midtown's tallest, most exclusive skyscrapers, at the headquarters of the Stanton Group, a company known for its impeccable but frigid reputation. Michael decided he wouldn't wear his finest suit. He wanted to see their genuine reaction. He put on a dark blue, logoless hoodie, black jeans, and neat but casual boots. In his estimation, $50 million was his suit. He knew this might raise eyebrows, but it was his silent protest against superficiality. True success is in the substance, ma'am, not the polish, he whispered to himself, recalling his grandmother's words from North Carolina. In his pocket lay his phone, displaying an electronic copy of the contract and the crucial, unannounced rider, a requirement for establishing a separate, independent committee composed of community representatives to oversee the housing distribution. Without this clause, the deal was dead. It was his non-negotiable term. He arrived exactly 15 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to begin. The Stanton Group skyscraper rose, like a frigid monument to arrogance. The cold marble of the lobby gleamed under immaculate light that seemed to repel any warmth. Standing by the turnstiles was a security guard. His name, according to the badge, was Wayne. He was tall, with steel gray eyes, and a uniform that looked flawless, almost like military armor. As Michael approached, smelling ozone and expensive polish, Wayne didn't even turn his head, his gaze skimming over Michael as if he were just a smudge on the carpet. "Good morning," Michael said, his voice calm, with the slight southern drawl he usually suppressed. Wayne merely raised his hand in a dismissive, commanding gesture. "Access for personnel or registered guests only, kid." What kind of delivery are you making? His tone was flat, but underlying it was an arrogance that cut like cold steel. Michael felt that familiar sensation beginning to stir within him, the same feeling he had when he was first rejected at an audition. I'm here for the investors' meeting, Mr. Wayne, with Ms. Charlotte Visconti. Michael showed his phone, clearly displaying the electronic invitation. Wayne didn't take the phone. He only tilted his head slightly, his face contorting into a barely perceptible, yet offensive, smirk. Listen, son. This is the 78th floor, not a gym or a pizza run. Maybe you have the wrong building? He could feel his skin literally itch from this hidden racism, wrapped up in the paper of professionalism. Michael sighed, recalling his mantra, quiet power. He couldn't afford to lose control. Not now, when an entire community was at stake. I understand my attire may not meet your standards, ma'am, but I'm here as an investor. I arrived on time. Please allow me to contact Ms. Visconti. Michael tried to push the phone forward again, but Wayne stepped closer. His shadow covered Michael. Are you calling me ma'am? Do I look like a woman? You're nobody here. This hall doesn't admit types like you for deals like this. Get out before I call security for unwanted intrusion. This was the turning point. Wayne's words rang out like a gunshot. Michael realized that his quiet power was being perceived not as dignity, but as weakness. Wayne thought he could afford this. I'm sorry you see the world this way, Mr. Wayne, Michael said, his gaze direct and heavy. He unlocked his phone and opened the document. This is my contract, $50 million. And there's one clause that Ms. Visconti doesn't know about, but which is critical to finalizing the deal. She's on the 78th floor, and she's not answering calls because they don't want me to remind her of this clause. This was a major plot twist in Michael's life. Subscribe and let me know when you watch this video. It will help me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. Now let's move on. They knew he was due to arrive, and that he was supposed to bring an important document. They only knew he would come, and that he would bring the document. Wayne didn't know Michael had the document. This made Michael feel trapped. He couldn't allow himself to be detained at the doorstep when his money was meant to be not just an investment, but salvation for his neighborhood. Too many children are counting on this building for me to let some arrogant system or person take it away. The tension in his chest was mounting. He caught the scent of cigarettes trapped in Wayne's uniform fabric, and that smell, strangely, was a trigger for him. It was the smell of the old world, the world where people were forced to hide their true intentions. That's not my area of responsibility. Wayne cut him off, reverting to his professional yet menacing tone. I'm responsible for enforcing the entry rules. And you, in your gear, do not meet our standards. This is a private building. Either you take your delivery and leave, or I will be forced to use physical means. Wayne took a step back, his hand resting on his holster. Meanwhile, other investors began entering the doors, men and women in flawless, tailored suits, their glances sliding over Michael and Wayne with indifferent surprise. No one stopped. No one asked what was happening. Their indifference was as cold as the marble beneath their feet. Michael felt his isolation intensifying. He was alone against the crowd. Mr. Wayne, you are not just preventing me from attending the meeting. You are actively sabotaging a multi-million-dollar deal. If I don't include this clause, the deal will fall through, and Ms. Visconti and her partners will look like people who ignore social justice. It won't just be a scandal. It will be a catastrophe. Wayne merely smiled, his grin predatory and full of hubris. That's not a security issue, kid. Now get out. Your catastrophe is your personal problem. He pressed a button on his radio. Need assistance at the main entrance. One unwanted delivery man refuses to leave the premises. Michael didn't know how far Wayne would go, but he knew his warning had been ignored. his dignity humiliated. This was the point of no return. He could no longer remain quiet. He spotted a journalist he knew in the crowd. The journalist didn't have a camera, but he had a phone, and his gaze was fixed on Michael. Michael decided he had to do something different now. He pulled out his phone and started typing quickly. He thought it was just the air conditioner noise, but the air conditioner was off. The thought flashed through his mind. It was a sound Michael suddenly heard, a faint, yet unsettling hum coming from deep within the building. It wasn't related to him, but it created an atmosphere of impending disaster. He sensed that the system was rotting not just externally, but internally too. "This is your area of responsibility, and you are going to fail it," Michael told Wayne, holding his gaze. He watched Wayne step toward him, his face flushed with anger. His arrogance, finally, had escalated into uncontrollable rage. Wayne could not tolerate being challenged by someone in a hoodie. "What do you think you're doing, you damn nigger? Do you even know who I am? Niggers like you are only supposed to do the dirty work. Get out!" Wayne crossed the line. He used the forbidden word. He dropped the mask of professionalism, completely exposing his racism in front of Michael and the few investors who remained in the hall. Michael felt his heartbeat quicken. Two worlds collided inside him. The world where he had learned to control himself, and the world where he was constantly humiliated. He realized that the only way to win this battle was to turn the humiliation into public justice. He knew his actions would have consequences that could ruin his career, but this was what he had to do. Michael stood still. He met Wayne's gaze, but his eyes no longer radiated calm. They burned with determination. He pressed the record button and raised his phone, pointing it directly at the face of the guard who had just uttered the racist slur. The journalist in the crowd also raised his phone, realizing he was witnessing something larger than a simple argument. Wayne froze, his arrogance instantly replaced by fear and frenzy. He lunged forward, trying to knock the phone out of Michael's hand to destroy the evidence. "You won't film anything! That's illegal!" he hissed, his breathing heavy and hot. Michael dodged. At that moment, two uniformed security guards, called by Wayne, rushed into the lobby. They saw Wayne physically attempting to assault the delivery man in the hoodie and instantly rushed to their superior's aid. They grabbed Michael by the arms, squeezing them with a professional, brutal grip. "You'll regret this, nigger!" Wayne yelled, now completely out of control, his face contorted with hatred. But Michael had already hit send, and the audio recording, including the racist outburst, had just been sent to the journalist. Michael didn't struggle. He only looked at the windows, through which the New York skyline was visible. All his quiet protest, his attempt to act with dignity, had failed in the face of this primitive, systemic arrogance. But he also knew that now, with him detained, his only leverage, the community clause in the contract, would never be submitted. And he knew he had to take responsibility for what he had done. Michael saw police officers rush through the doors. This wasn't building security. This was actual NYPD. And they were coming straight for him. He realized Wayne had called not just his guards, but law enforcement, accusing Michael of assault. This was the perfect twist to destroy Michael. "They'll lock you up, ma'am, and your $50 million will go to other people." Wayne smirked, his eyes gleaming with malice. The officers approached, their faces stoic. Michael's hands were being cuffed behind his back. He was detained, having missed the meeting, having failed to submit his critical clause. His career was on the brink of collapse. His reputation was at risk. But he knew that the real storm that would expose the whole truth was only just beginning. Subscribe and let me know when you watch this video. It will help me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. Now let's move on. The snap of the handcuffs was sharp, metallic, and terribly final, echoing in the cathedral-like marble lobby. Wayne's face, contorted by the hate he just unleashed, relaxed into a sickening smirk of victory. The two building security guards, having successfully subdued the unwanted intruder, stepped back, leaving Michael B. Jordan in the hands of the NYPD. "Good job, fellas," Wayne drawled, adjusting his collar, believing he had successfully disposed of a nuisance and secured his place in the corporation's rigid hierarchy. "They'll lock you up, ma'am. And your $50 million will go to other people." Wayne's words lingered, a toxic promise of systemic malice. Michael's only response was a slow, deliberate exhale. He didn't fight the restraints. He didn't even flinch when the officers tightened the cuffs. His eyes, burning with that quiet power, fixed on the elevator doors leading to the 78th floor, a silent testament that this was far from over. His defeat here, on the cold marble floor, was merely the starting gun for a far greater public race. The scene in the lobby had been chaos, but the real catastrophe was unfolding one block over, in the quiet office of investigative journalist Ethan Sharp. Ethan had been casually walking by, phone in hand, when he saw the altercation, and then he received the single, cryptic text message from Michael, containing the chilling, unedited audio file. Ethan was an old-school reporter who believed in truth over clicks, but he knew this story had the potential for both. He rushed back to his desk, the sound of Wayne's racial slur burning in his ears. He listened again, the hatred raw and undeniable. Then he wrote, fast. The story was simple. Star investor Michael B. Jordan arrested after security guards' racist outburst, the secret tape that changed everything. At the precinct, Michael was processed. He remained silent, calmly requesting a lawyer. The attending desk sergeant, a tired man named Miller, recognized him immediately, the look in his eyes shifting from professional indifference to stunned concern. "Mr. Jordan? What in God's name happened here?" Miller asked, bewildered by the high-profile arrest over a simple trespass complaint. Michael said nothing, only meeting his gaze. "They want me to shout, to rage, to play the stereotype they've created," Michael thought, his internal monologue quiet and precise. "But true strength is in the restraint. It's in the truth I just released." Up on the 78th floor, Miss Charlotte Visconti, the Stanton Group's lead partner, a woman whose entire persona was built on cold, clinical efficiency, was just beginning the investor presentation. She glanced at the empty seat reserved for Michael B. Jordan. "Well, it seems our highly anticipated partner from Newark has missed his flight, or perhaps encountered traffic," she stated, her voice sharp with implied condescension. A few investors chuckled nervously. Charlotte began detailing the Newark project, deftly omitting any mention of community oversight, the precise clause Michael was meant to deliver. She spoke of profit margins and optimization, using cold, controlled language to justify minimizing affordable housing units. Her presentation was flawless, her projections aggressive. The investors were nodding, dollar signs shimmering in their eyes. The whole system was built on the assumption of Michael's silence. Suddenly, the room went dark. The hum Michael had heard from the lobby vanished, replaced by a dense, suffocating silence. The expensive monitors flickered and died. Emergency lights, dim and orange, bathed the room in a sickly glow. "Power failure? In the Stanton building?" one investor muttered, incredulous. Charlotte's composure broke, a tiny, ragged crack in her polished facade. "It's a city grid issue. We have backups," she snapped, pulling out her personal tablet, only to find the Wi-Fi signal was completely dead. The digital documents she needed to finalize the deal, the contracts that now excluded Michael's clause, were locked away, inaccessible. The power failure was not a city issue. It was the first blow of the universe striking back. The unsettling hum Michael sensed had been a warning, a vital cooling system on the 77th floor. overworked and ignored by budget cuts Charlotte had approved, had just failed dramatically, tripping a massive breaker and cutting all non-essential power, including the main servers and the high-speed data link. Michael's quiet concern about the internal rot of the building, dismissed by Wayne as irrelevant, was now crippling the very deal it was meant to secure. Just then, an assistant burst in, phone in hand, pale and shaking. "Ms. Visconti, you need to see this. It's everywhere. It's trending globally. Hashtag justice for Jordan. And the audio." Charlotte snatched the phone. The headline screamed, "Stanton Group security guards file racism exposed. Actor Michael B. Jordan falsely arrested." And there was the clip, Wayne's voice, raw and unfiltered. "What do you think you're doing, you damn nigger? Niggers like you are only supposed to do the dirty work." The investors, who had just been laughing at Michael's tardiness, recoiled. The smell of fear was now thicker than the stale air. Their millions were built on reputation, and that reputation was now dissolving in a torrent of online rage. The meeting collapsed faster than the power grid. Charlotte, her face white with a terror born not of shame, but of financial loss, realized the depth of her miscalculation. She had dismissed Michael B. Jordan, the man of quiet dignity, because of his clothes. And in doing so, she had failed to recognize his power. Michael was released within the hour. Sergeant Miller, having heard the audio clip and sensing the political storm, had ensured the charges were immediately dropped, classifying the incident as a misunderstanding, while discreetly flagging Wayne for internal review. Stepping out into the cold New York air, Michael was greeted not by the lonely silence of a failed mission, but by a crush of cameras and microphones. The journalist, Ethan, fought his way to the front. "Mr. Jordan, any comment on the audio? On Wayne's dismissal? On the Stanton deal?" Michael, still wearing the hoodie, looked directly into the camera. He didn't rant. He didn't retaliate. His voice was low, measured, carrying the weight of his southern roots. "I came to make a statement about community, ma'am. My attire was my first statement. My contract, which they prevented me from delivering, was my second. The only thing I have to say now is this: my fight was never about a word. It was about whether those in power listened to the quiet warnings before the big failures happen. That building, that deal, that system, it needs an overhaul." He spoke with the calm conviction of a man who had already won. Wayne, meanwhile, was experiencing his catastrophic downfall. Fired immediately, he tried to argue, pointing to his long service. But his vile words, recorded and broadcast worldwide, offered no defense. His arrogance had not only cost him his job, but now threatened his freedom, as the NYPD launched an official investigation into the false arrest and racial abuse. Subscribe and let me know when you watch this video. It will help me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. Now let's move on. The investigation led by Ethan, the journalist, revealed a deeper rot. The unsettling how Michael felt was confirmed by an anonymous tip about the Newark project. The Stanton Group had been aggressively cutting corners on construction materials and safety protocols, making Michael's community oversight clause not a luxury, but a vital safety check. They hadn't just ignored Michael's clause. They were actively trying to hide their fraudulent practices, and Wayne was merely the lowest-ranking cog in the systemic machine protecting the secret. 2 days later, Michael received a call from Charlotte Visconti. The deal was officially suspended, the $50 million awaiting transfer. She sounded like a machine that had been dipped in vinegar, acidic and weak. "Mr. Jordan," she began, her tone a forced blend of professionalism and contrition, "I must apologize for the extreme unprofessionalism of our former employee, and for the unfortunate timing of the power issue. To compensate, we are prepared to offer you full creative control over the project and a $10 million settlement, provided you release a statement exonerating the Stanton Group from any Systemic issues. Michael sat back in his loft, the New York light finally breaking through the clouds. Quiet power, he reminded himself. He was calm, but unyielding. I appreciate the offer, Ms. Visconti, but this isn't about compensation. It's about accountability. My original clause regarding the Independent Community Committee must be fully reinstated, with full transparency on all past and future structural budgets. And I want to see the maintenance reports for that air conditioning unit on the 77th floor. If the system is willing to risk an entire building, it's willing to risk an entire community. Charlotte hesitated. The request for the maintenance reports was a subtle trap. Those reports would expose the budget cuts and her direct involvement. But the public pressure was a vice. Her company's stock was hemorrhaging value. She had no choice. Agreed, Mr. Jordan. We accept all your terms. The victory was complete. Michael hadn't shouted, hadn't sued for a dime. He had simply insisted on the truth and the safety of his community, leveraging the one thing the Stanton Group feared more than bankruptcy: public exposure. Weeks later, Michael stood on the construction site in Newark, the freshly poured foundation solid beneath his feet. The community center was moving forward, secured by the contract he had fought for. The noise of construction was now the sound of progress, not peril. He wasn't wearing a suit, he was wearing a hard hat and his signature hoodie. An elderly woman from the neighborhood, Mrs. Elaine, approached him, tears in her eyes. Thank you, son. You didn't yell. You just stood tall. Michael smiled, his eyes warm. I just remembered what my grandmother always told me. When they try to silence you, you don't need a loud voice. You need a document of truth and a dignity they can't arrest. His internal monologue provided the final reflection, the moral of the story. They think power is how much money you have, or how loud you shout. But true power is the quiet willingness to do what's right, even when it costs you everything. It's the truth that, once released, will do the shouting for you. The arrogant will always fall to the patient truth. This story, which began in disgrace and ended in triumph, resonated across the globe. It was a lesson in respect, boundaries, and the laws of nature, that arrogance always precedes a great fall. The lesson: nature does not forgive arrogance. If you ignore the quiet warnings, the system will eventually collapse, taking the arrogant down with it. If this story of quiet dignity winning against systemic spite made you feel the true meaning of strength, hit subscribe. Because the truth is always worth having a voice.